All right. Just making sure we're set to go with Livestream. Yep, looks like we're live. So see a few more folks joining, so we're going to give it a couple more minutes before we get started. Thanks for your patience. Hopefully everyone's having a good start to June. Hey, Ricardo.
Hey.
All right, so we're 1 minute past, so I think can kick things off. I'm sharing my slides, so hopefully everybody can see it. If you have any questions, feel free to type them on the Zoom chat or just stop me as I even while I'm talking. Just a quick reminder on our community code of conduct. We've been doing this for all of our events. We do have a code of conduct, and we want to remind people that we want to have a open and welcoming environment. So there's a full text of code of conduct if you haven't seen it before, and the incident reporting email alias. So just a quick reminder of that. And the agenda today, we'll start off with some community news, what's been happening over the past month, or even prior to that. I'll just want to have a recap of what we've accomplished over the past several months. Ryan is, I'll have him introduce himself in a few minutes, but he's, if you haven't seen his introductions on Slack, he leads our product team, and he's going to lead a discussion on pre-aggregations. Obviously, we get there are a lot of discussions and questions on Slack and other channels, so we thought it was a good time to sort of have a any of us while we're talking, if you have any questions. In terms of community updates, just a couple of things on Slack, particularly on profile. You probably saw this announcement on the Slack channel on the 25th. So Slack has introduced a pronouns field under profile. So I went ahead and turned that on. So feel free to take advantage of that. If you have any questions, let me know. It's just pretty simple. It's one of the fields that you can fill out if you go under profiles and edit your profile. So feel free to take advantage of that. A lot of communities are starting to turn this on, so we thought we would do the same as well. Like a sort of the custom field I added was a calendar link. Some of you may have booked meetings with me through my Calendly account, and I've done it with other community members as well. So if you want to include your links to Calendly or other apps that you use for booking meetings, feel free to add those. Just want to facilitate. I'm seeing a lot more questions being answered amongst community members and people connecting on the Slack calls. And I've been sort of, I've been wanting to write a blog post. I've been part of the community for that 8 months now, almost 8 months. I just wanted to look back and do a recap of what we've accomplished as a community. And I'll probably write a blog post in the next week or so. But just wanted to share some stats and where we come over the past several months. When I joined the community back in early or first half of October, I think we had about 2,000 members on Slack. Now it's actually closer to 3,500. So the Slack community, you probably noticed that there's just a lot more, not just people, but a lot more conversations that are happening on Slack, which is great to see. And like I said, people not only sort of answering each other's questions, but making connections, which which is what Slack is great for. The other thing that we've been looking at is people contributing to our software on GitHub, whether it's through issues or pull requests. And this is sort of the data that I've been looking at month over month. And most of last year, I think we had about like 50 contributors on GitHub. And you can see that like it's inching up. I mean, so we had over the past couple of months, we had like in March and May, we had over 70 contributors contributing to our GitHub instance. And this month, I believe we're like already close to like 30. We're not even halfway into the month. So really gratified to see people not just contributing pull requests, which is great, but also having discussions on issues and reporting bugs or making feature requests. So I definitely want to encourage people to continue doing that. And definitely want to see this chart continue to go upwards. In terms of some of the things that we try to focus on. I mean, one key thing was sort of like a recognition. We had a lot of community members that have been making a lot of contributions to not just our software, but to community in general. It was fun to launch the Heroes program. You see people like JC, Ricardo, and Tanvi that are regular attendees to these calls. I mean, these individuals have been contributing, or they've been part of our community for well over a year, and they're continuing to make contributions in many ways. So it was fun to sort of launch that program and recognize these individuals. And we probably, sometime in the next few months, we'll probably, think about adding more people to the Heroes ranks as well. And the other initiatives that I listed here with the images are basically increasing the communication channels or way we communicate with each other. And monthly call was one of the first ones that we did. During the first month, we kicked it off, and we weren't quite sure how it was going to go, but we have a lot of people, 20 or 30 people that in the call. Synchronously, but also what I've been noticing is that within 24 hours, we'll have like over 100 people sort of watching the recording. So there's definitely when I joined the community, now that's grown more than tenfold. We definitely want to add a lot more content on our YouTube channel, not just monthly calls, but people like Hassan has contributed getting started videos, and we'll plan on doing more of those. People can get more resources out of our YouTube channel. We also started publicizing our quarterly roadmaps. So we wanted to be open about what our development team is working on. Feel free to go look at our projects tab and not only look at the current roadmap, but what we've worked on in the past few quarters. And it's been great to get like a feedback and suggestions from community members on these as well. And more recently, this is sort of the maturity of our community. I mean, Slack has been continuing to grow, and it's a great avenue. But I think we're sort of getting to a phase where we need to have a real a knowledge-based platform. And we kicked off this course a couple of months ago, and not just not just in terms one of the numbers that I look at is not just how many users are actually logging in. I mean, that's been steadily growing, but what I see is just number of page views. We typically have several hundred people looking through things like Google searches or other searches. They sort of land on some of the articles or posts that are posted on Discourse. So I mean, slowly but surely, we think this is going to be a good resource for the community, and hopefully we'll see continue to grow. So we've done in terms of addressing the communication challenges as community continues to grow. Obviously the work is not done, but hopefully we can be more transparent and open about what we do, and also get your feedback as we continue to grow. And then finally, it's been, I think I shared some of these, and you may have seen this on Twitter. These are all images or of tweets. First couple are our community members sort of celebrating the Cube.js swags. Been one of my favorite favorite part of my job is going to the post office and dropping off of swag for people who've made contributions. So Marvin's in Uganda, Artur, he's in Lithuania. So it's not, we're not just talking about developers in Western Europe and North America, which tends to be pretty dominant in a lot of open source communities. But so it's been great to work with and connect with community members in different parts of the world. And speaking of discourse, I need to stop at the post office sometime today or tomorrow, drop off some early pioneer swags. So hopefully we'll continue to have people contributing to the growth of discourse and have fun tweets that we can look at to celebrate people's contributions. So yeah, this is just wanted to sort of recap, and like I said, I'll probably talk about more of these in the blog post, but wanted to I think like a couple of months ago when I realized that I've been here for half a year, just wanted to look back and see what we've what we've accomplished as a community. Been pretty happy with and thankful for all of your contributions, and hopefully we'll have more celebrations to come. So I think that's it for the community news. And I want to sort of switch gears and have Ryan lead the discussion on pre-aggregations. And we invited a number of community members. I think with the exception of Tanvi, who's feeling under the weather, we have Ricardo and JC here who can share their experience and know-how on pre-aggregations. And I also let me advance my slide here. The reason why we want to have this discussion is that, obviously pre-aggregations is, what I call sort of a marquee feature. But we not only get a lot of questions like on Slack and other channels, but we feel like this is like very underutilized in our community. Especially now that Ryan's on board, we wanted to find out the reason like sort of behind this. And we've, started having conversations with a lot of community members and also looking at feedback from Slack. We know we can do a better job of lowering the barrier to entry. So there are a number of initiatives that we're thinking about in terms of creating more contents for onboarding. I think we've made a lot of improvement on documentation, but it's obviously not perfect. I just started talking about this with Ryan, but maybe towards the end of the summer when people are back from vacations, we can do a more dedicated, like a tutorial session. Be beneficial for a lot of communities. So I just wanted to sort of set the stage there and pause, and I'll think I can stop sharing my screen and I'll just turn things over to you, Ryan, if that's okay with you. So and then I mentioned a couple of community members I specifically invited for discussions, but obviously this discussion is open for anybody. So if you have any questions or comments as we go along, please feel free to chime in. That's what this call is for. So yeah, let me just stop there and turn things over to you, Ryan.
Yeah, thanks, Ray. All right, are you still sharing?
I don't think I am. Yeah, I definitely stopped sharing. So.
Okay, it's telling me can't share screen while other participants sharing.
Let me try
Strange.
this.
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
All right.
Okay, let me move on over to this. That's one slide ahead. Yeah, so thanks, Ray, for that. And just so you all know who I am, I'll give a brief introduction of myself. So I joined Cube.js, the company, last month. I'm very excited to be a part of this Cube.js community. I'm certainly no stranger to open source communities in general, but I'll be frank in that this is my first kind of foray into the data analytics space. I spent quite a bit of time in the DevOps space before this. And yeah, so we're going to have the panel discussion now on pre-aggregations. As Ray mentioned, this is what we believe to be one of the most important features of Cube.js. And it's surprising, I guess, to some of us that it's not something that's universally used, and everyone has their reasons to use it or not. So we'll hopefully learn from this panel a bit of some of those reasons to use pre-aggregations or not to use pre-aggregations, and what some of the experiences were for that. All right, so with that, I'll and anyone can answer.
Yeah, I think we lost audio for a few seconds there, Ryan. So
Oh.
Yeah, I know I did, and looks like JC did as well. So the audio seems to be back. So if you want to, yeah, restate your comment or question.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So how important is the speed of query execution for your applications today?
Gotcha. I can kick that one off. So we actually, I work for a company called Jobber, and we were very excited about the pre-aggregation capabilities of Cube.js when we first noticed the project. For specifically this reason, we actually were looking for something to do a fairly expensive operation, and we wanted to do it on our dashboard, basically like live to customers, and we wanted that dashboard to load in under 2 seconds. And that's a pretty aggressive target for like a dashboard that shows a bunch of data and that's directly querying the database. And so we had done some custom engineering work to try and speed it up, but there was just certain customers or edge cases where it was just like too slow, even timing out in some cases, and we knew we had to level up our tech level here. So when we were first looking at pre-aggregations, the speed of query execution was actually pretty much the number one thing we were looking for. And I think there's more I can say about that, but yeah, that's kind of my TLDR.
Cool, thank you.
I could chime in real quick too. I'm Kevin. Most of you probably don't know me. I've talked with Ray and Ryan a bunch over the last couple of months. I work for a really small startup called OK. Part of our product is basically analytics for engineering teams. So obviously that's one of the reasons we decided to go with Cube.js. Pre-aggregations was one aspect. A lot of the reason we wanted to go over to Cube.js is it kind of served as a nice abstraction layer, specifically with the data schemas. It allowed us to create our own data dictionary, especially with dynamic schema generation, made that a lot easier for us so we can kind of host our data dictionary in code. So like that's, some of the great things that Cube.js has kind of provided for us. We had our own in-house caching layer before, and we kind of hit an inflection point where, were we going to continue building but pre-aggregations. So I think it wasn't until about a month ago that we started actually trying to use the pre-aggregations. And so there's two things. One is a lot of our rollups are quantile based. And unfortunately, the existing pre-aggregations feature, as far as I know, doesn't support rolling up quantiles. That could be a separate discussion even outside of this. And BigQuery, just that kind of time to first byte latency tends to be pretty high. So we were hoping that since our data set's pretty small, that we can actually leverage pre-aggregations to shove our BigQuery tables back into Postgres using, I think it was original SQL. But the main issue we ran into with that was SQL dialects. It looks like going from BigQuery to Postgres was just breaking for us. So we kind of played with it for a couple of days and then just abandoned it, and then have our own internal stopgaps now until we can kind of figure out, if we want to keep pursuing that or actually build our own in-house BigQuery to Postgres. We'd still use Cube.js as our abstraction layer, but until we can get quantile-based pre-aggregations, that's kind of that kind of hacky BigQuery, full-on BigQuery to Postgres. Original SQL thing would probably be the only thing we'd be able to use for now. I'm not sure if that's helpful or made sense to anyone.
Yeah, thank you for that. And let me just make sure that everyone knows what we're talking about when we say pre-aggregations. I mean, as we mentioned earlier, like this is not a feature that everyone's been using. And part of the reason maybe because you just don't know what a pre-aggregation is. So pre-aggregation is defined in the Cube.js ecosystem as the best layman's terms that I've read or seen is a condensed version of your data that is optimized for your analytics needs. So if you have large data sets like what we're talking about here on the panel, a pre-aggregation is the condensed version of that data that can serve your application for its analytics needs in a much more performant way. Sometimes it's called part of the caching layer of Cube.js. And so when we're saying things like rollups, you may have heard that term mentioned on this panel a few times. That's one of the means by which we aggregate this data, which is by grouping it along these dimensions of the cube. And so what Kevin was talking about was one of the ways to aggregate this data is not as flexible as your team perhaps needs, right? So yeah. And yeah, if there's, I guess seeing on the chat that there's a little bit of some audio issues here and there. So let us know if we need to repeat anything. I know it's 9 a.m. on the West Coast, so it's the busiest hour to be on the internet. So I'm not surprised if there's.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I've been checking Zoom status, and they're reporting a degraded performance. So it's unfortunate. So I think a lot of people are having issues. But yes, like Ryan said, feel free to ask us to repeat anything. So
yeah, cool. Anyone else wanted to chime in on the need for speed, essentially, with your queries? Or should we move on? Cool. Yeah, let's move on. So what resources, for example, any of the docs, Slack, blog posts, did you all find accessible to you in terms of getting familiar with pre-aggregations when you were first getting started?
It was a while ago now when we used pre-aggregations. It was a little bit of the early days, so this may be a little bit different now. I think there's a bit more available in the docs than there were originally, but it was a combination for us. It was a combination of what was in the documentation, but also there was a lot of information in Slack, like people asking questions about it. This was before the message limit was hit in like 10 minutes flat. So there was still, you could actually still search it a bit. And also Stack Overflow, which is of course a good place to be looking for questions because it's more persistent over time. But we actually ended up looking at the source code a fair amount as well. We did a pretty deep dive into how pre-aggregations worked for us, because we wanted to customize it a little bit for our use case. So we actually even ended up we ended up getting a pretty good understanding of it eventually, and also had a lot of support from the Cube team.
Awesome, great. Anyone else remember how they learned about pre-aggregations?
And it was the same for us, more or less. I
Okay.
actually, in terms of open source projects, I feel like your guys' docs are pretty good. So yeah, I mean, even with the docs, we're able to kind of work through a POC with some very basic pre-aggregations, and then also having to kind of go into the source code for a bunch of stuff. But I feel like to at least get started, the docs seem like they're in pretty good shape.
I mean, Kevin, I guess I have a follow-up and for you too, JC. I mean, obviously ability to look at the source code, I mean, being able to do that is pretty helpful. But I guess my concern is how accessible that is. I mean, you two are pretty technical, so I guess you can sort of figure out what's going on with the feature. But yeah, I mean, not sure how, like, you know, if that's necessarily accessible to everybody, like people that are just in like data scientists, for example, and not necessarily programmers. Or JC, like and sort of decipher what's going on.
Yeah, for us it was it worked out because we wanted to contribute some improvements in the area anyways. But yeah, that definitely cracking open that area of the code base was like, wow, I thought the rest of Cube.js was written like very well. Like you need a PhD in, I don't know, something to follow along what's happening with it. It's written in kind of this generic way so that it can apply to a bunch of different technologies. Which is actually in a good quality, but it also makes it a little bit hard to just dive into because it is kind of generalized terms. And the pre-aggregation area is even more heavier in that sense. And so yeah, that will definitely reduce the accessibility, not because it's like, you know, hard to read spaghetti code or anything like that. It's actually well written. It's just because it's a time investment, and it might be more time than someone's willing to use, or possibly like Node may not be the person's first language. So there's definitely a number of things. Like I have some suggestions as well that I've been thinking about in terms of, you know, maybe addressing some of the interaction points with it so that you don't have to drop down to, you know, source code to understand what's going on.
Cool, thanks.
Cool. Is there anyone on the panel who decided they don't need pre-aggregations at this time?
I mean, for us right now, we did deprioritize it because we were able to do a few things on our end. But it's still like something we would ultimately like to do. But like I was saying before, the quantile-based rollup is kind of a deal breaker for us. So if we can't figure out a way to do it within Cube.js, we would probably just figure out a way to do it ourselves.
I actually think there's a Cube.js does I call it level 1, level 2 caching. I can't remember if I got that from the docs, but level 1 caching being like Redis and level 2 caching being pre-aggregations. Cube.js does such a great job of the Redis-based caching and giving you this like nice language to do your queries in, and like really good defaults for like refresh keys. And so like the data stays current correctly. You don't do a bunch of like cache invalidation or manual cache invalidation. It just does such a good job of working in that level 1 caching area. I almost wonder if that doesn't make people like think, oh, you know what? I probably could get faster with pre-aggregations, but it's working so well without them that I don't even need to think about it. So it's I almost wonder if some people are in that situation.
We kind of are. We don't really use pre-aggregations because, first of all, our data volumes are not that big. So it's mostly more on the quick caching that the Redis provides. So that gives us enough, I would say, for our usage.
It goes a long ways. And we found like you probably could get away with that a lot, but there's we wanted to provide a first, like the very first person that makes that very first query that isn't cached yet in Redis, we didn't want them to have to suffer, for like a 30-second load time, which is then cached and is super fast. We wanted everybody, we basically didn't want to have like some select people basically getting those cache misses and having a bad experience. So to get that great speed across the board for everyone, you have to do these strategies where you're already basically running with a hot cache. So there's multiple ways of achieving that. Pre-aggregations kind of gives you that for free because it's already pre-computed the expensive part. So actually, it's really cool seeing the graph of our daily traffic. It was really confusing at first until I realized what was happening. But so we do daily rollups. So we have a bunch of data points. Like we collect data all the time, and then we aggregate it daily so that we can draw like a trend of like, this is what your month looks like, and we've pre-calculated each daily point on that trend. And so when someone goes and looks at their dashboard for the first time in the morning, it's a new set of data. So it's not in Redis. So it falls back down to the level 2 pre-aggregation cache. Now this is pre-computed, but it's still a database query, so it's slow. It's 110 milliseconds that they have to wait for that database query. It's so slow. And then it goes into Redis. So the next time they look at that database or at that dashboard, now it's a Redis hit because of course the data hasn't changed throughout the day. And now it's a 25 millisecond call. And so we actually get this graph where like it starts out at about 125 milliseconds, the average, but then as the day progresses, the response time starts speeding up, even though the number of people using our system are going up. So it's like more people use the system, it gets faster. What is this technology? It's good stuff anyways.
Would you say that is the main benefit for pre-aggregations in your view for your use case, to have that first hit experience be optimized a little bit better, and then also to support the growing traffic sustainably?
Yeah, like we had a pretty aggressive times. We wanted 95th percentile to be 2 seconds or better, and that's for the dashboard to load. So basically the data request portion of that has to be even less, probably under a second in most cases. So to get that, yeah, we couldn't rely entirely on the Redis caching in our case because it was such expensive data that cache misses would be a bad experience for someone. So that was the number one thing was that. And the other kind of side benefit is that it actually shifts database load off of our primary database. So it actually distributes the load better because now you're doing your pre-computation in the middle of the night during off-peak, and then you're loading a separate, in our case, it was a separate roll-up database. And so it helps us in terms of scaling our database load. And it also just lets us do things that weren't possible previously, like displaying a month-over-month trend of some of our data just wasn't even realistically possible without a pre-calculation approach.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you. Next, I want to dive into a little bit about what are the different types of pre-aggregations people are using here. So rollups, obviously, for example, one of the most popular, and there are various ways of doing rollups. Curious to know as well, like how often you're refreshing your pre-aggregations and that sort of thing. If there's like one standard way that everyone's doing pre-aggregations, or if there's a multitude of ways that fit particular needs. or we could move on to another topic if we if we don't know or can't recall.
We use rollups pretty much exclusively.
Yeah.
We're exploring some of the original SQL style aggregations. I will admit, about every 3 months, I have to go reread what original SQL aggregations means. It hasn't stuck yet. It's a kind of an interesting way that it works that I just can't seem to remember from the word original SQL. But yeah, we're pretty much just dealing with rollups or so. And I guess just a quick note in terms of like the challenges a challenge with when we're building these rollups is these rollups are actually querying our data a bit differently than our product. So historically we've tuned our performance, like our database access patterns, what data has indexes, things like that, based on product usage. But then we have this other system that's basically calculating these things in the night, and it's querying data in a different way. And so what we were finding is that it would sometimes be really slow, like it wouldn't complete in a reasonable amount of time. And that was because it was querying data and it was getting index misses, basically starting to do table scans. And so one of the challenges for us is whenever we're defining a new rollup is, and this is one of our engineers actually does this, he puts Cube into dev mode so he can see the queries that Cube is generating, and then reruns them with a query plan, reruns them to get the query plan against our production replica, so that he can catch table scans and then go and like add in some indexes that are needed. So it's really our own fault for not having properly indexed or perfectly indexed data for all different ways you can query it, I suppose. But it is catching some table scans that way. That's possibly one friction point that might be worth thinking about helping people reduce in the future, is as you're building out these rollups, if there's some way that the product could, like Cube could suggest, oh, it looks like your source database doesn't have an index on this field. That could be a problem. That would be helpful.
Nice. Yeah.
Oh. Yeah. I mean, I was just gonna, sorry, Ryan, like I was just gonna say, like we're running up against time a bit here. So yeah, we definitely want to, I mean, I'm guessing we want to have at least 5-10 minutes for feature demos, but yeah, I'll let you kind of wrap it up. And I think Pavel's here too. Like, I don't know, Pavel, if you want to add anything based on the discussions we had so far. But
yeah, hi everyone. Yeah, I think we would. Yeah, a lot of learning. Yeah, thanks everyone for sharing the feedback. It's really helpful.
Yeah, and just to follow up on what was mentioned earlier around what is original SQL. So original SQL is another type of aggregation, which is really just the data as is exists in the source database. Why might you do it that way, you might ask? Well, say you're getting just started with pre-aggregations, you're not really sure how you want to partition or aggregate the data, or maybe it's not possible yet, or not easily possible yet, to kind of aggregate the data in a rollup fashion. So that's where an original SQL type may be useful. But thanks again to the panel. This is a really great discussion. Thank you for your time and for sharing your insights. So we'll move on. Oh, we'll move on to the feature demos now. So we're going to go over real quickly some things that are happening around pre-aggregations that we just talked about, and also, for example, some of the build time optimization work that we've done for pre-aggregations that we're very excited about, and then a quick demo of some playground features as well. So I'll have either been saying, are you able to hear me? Just doing sound check.
yeah,
okay, cool.
Yep.
So yeah, some things have been made default values. For example, type of pre-aggregation is going to default to rollup. This is because this is by far the most popular type of pre-aggregation, so it just kind of made sense. With the advent of Cube.store kind of taking over as where pre-aggregations are put, we are defaulting external to true on rollup pre-aggregations. And there's an environment variable that can be set for this, and it will be set to true by default on Docker or any new Docker or NPM deployments. Should note that it won't override. So this isn't going to be, if you have an existing deployment, this isn't going to be overrided unless you go in and set this environment variable yourself. Same thing for scheduled refreshes. So there's another environment variable introduced for this. We decided that, well, pretty much everyone's going to be doing scheduled refreshes in the background. So this makes sense to set true by default as well. And then coming soon, this isn't out there yet, we're going to kind of make the dimension references and measure, basically the member references of pre-aggregations shortened to just dimensions and measures and time dimension, things like that. So it's a little less wordy then. I should note that, so for example, those two environment variables that I mentioned, they're not going to override any existing deployments configurations unless you explicitly set them. However, we highly recommend that you try at least running with these set to true in your dev environments or in dev mode. See if that works, see if anything breaks. If not, great, and then put that into production. The reason why I suggest that is because eventually, this is kind of how we see the future for pre-aggregations is, using Cube.store, having scheduled refreshes by default. And so we're kind of in this transition period where we're moving over to that new future. But eventually this will be how all deployments behave. I should note that the removal of the word references from each of those members, dimension references, measure references, that will still continue to work if that's how your scheme is defined. So I just want to show an example of like what this is going to look like before and after. As you can see, the pre-aggregation that's defined in the schema on the right-hand side is far, cleaner and leaner than the one on the left. Basically this pre-aggregation can say, yeah, I know Cube.store is the coolest place to be now for a pre-aggregation. You don't need to tell me I'm external. I know rollups are the most popular type. You don't need to tell me that. So things like that, it's like, we see it as like telling someone you need to brush your teeth twice a day, you need to sleep 8 hours a day. Like that's all known, like that's all routine. So why, make that configurable, or why force everyone to make that configuration explicitly, right? So that's, this is exciting for us because hopefully this will help to kind of lower the barrier of entry around pre-aggregations. It's going to add less things for you to have to learn about when you're getting started. And I just want to do a quick little sneak peek of how we're thinking about this on Cube Cloud. So just as full disclaimer, this is the commercial hosted version of Cube.js that CubeDev, the company, is planning to GA in the not too distant future. We have added some functionality here around basically management and observability of pre-aggregations. Let me just, actually I can look 4 hours from now and I should see. So this is how we look at how we see pre-aggregations now in Cube Cloud. See, I have about 12 of them, and they're referenced at, well, actually, this is a bit of a misnomer here because what you're actually seeing are 12 partitions of the same pre-aggregation, and when they were refreshed and when they were built. And if you click into them, like you can see the versions and which queries we're using them. And that's pretty neat. We are updating this page though, and we think that this is kind of how it may look in the future. So instead of seeing those partitions by default, you see the pre-aggregation, the single pre-aggregation that I have in this deployment. And if I click into it, now I can start to see details of that pre-aggregation. For example, how often it's being refreshed, what the refresh range is. This is all kind of on a monthly or I think the partitions are monthly granularly. I ran the query for this year, so that's why I see all these partitions there for this year, this current 2021, and not yet for the others. And then some other useful information like how it's defined in the schema, what's using it, and then also are there any database indexes that it can use. So yeah, that's the quick demo of the Cube Cloud offering. And with that, I'll pass it on to my colleague Hassan, who should be a familiar face to you all. And he'll talk a little bit about the build time optimizations.
Hi, everyone. Hope you're all well. Let me just share my screen. So following on from the topic of pre-aggregations and optimizing their build times, we're introducing two new techniques. The first one is called export buckets, and to demonstrate how it works, we made the graph to show you. The idea is that Cube.js sends an unload query, and the source database receives that and writes the results of that query to cloud storage. The unload query would be a query that is a pre-aggregation based on the definitions from your schema. Once the data has been materialized on cloud storage, which could be AWS or GCP, KubeStore loads that from there, and then subsequent queries that Cube.js makes that match that pre-aggregation will be served from KubeStore. This is the most performant way of building your pre-aggregations, and we have support for it in the following databases: Redshift, BigQuery, and Snowflake, and we have support for Athena coming very soon. The second technique is called batching, and in this strategy, Cube.js will run the pre-aggregation query against the source database and receive the query results and then send them in batches across to KubeStore. And then similarly to how things work, when queries match a pre-aggregation, they'll hit KubeStore and the results will be returned. This is a significant improvement from how things work currently. And so we have support for Redshift, BigQuery, MySQL, Postgres, and Snowflake. Documentation for setting this up will be coming very shortly, and we always appreciate contributions for other unsupported drivers. So that was a quick overview of optimizing build time pre-aggregations. I quickly wanted to show you some developer playground improvements. I'll try and be really quick. So I already have a project here, and it already has some schemas. So let's go back to the build tab and add a measure. Immediately, we can see that the members are now grouped according to their cube, and we can actually search for them from here. So if I search for count here, and similarly on dimensions, I can also search for status. I'll quickly adjust the time dimension, and I'll hit run. And we can see we have some data, and we can also see that the query was not accelerated with a pre-aggregation. If we click this, we can copy this snippet, and if we go to our editor and we go to the orders schema and just paste in the pre-aggregation definition and give it a slightly better name, hit save. We'll go back and let's refresh the page and run the query again. Now we can see the query was accelerated with the pre-aggregation. So that's our new rollup designer. One last feature, which isn't released yet, a bit of a sneak preview, is query tabs. So here you can create one query, and you can go here and create a second query. You can have them both side by side. That's a quick look at all the developer improvements. So hand it back to Ryan.
Thanks, Hassan. Yeah, so I just also wanted to share a quick update on some of the, so we did a survey with some of the members of the community around Playground, and did some mockups and got feedback on those mockups. I'm just gonna play this mockup on loop so you can kind of see what we're thinking of doing. This isn't the final version, by the way. This is kind of what we're thinking of now. But we're thinking of basically ways to redesign the playground, and we got some great feedback on the survey on this. You know, people have strong opinions about colors. That's one thing. So we'll think about that. You'll also notice that we kind of reorganized this layout a bit and moved things to the side navigation bar to create a little more real estate on the kind of vertically for you to see the chart or whatever data visualization you have, and also allow you to kind of multi-select some of these member measures and dimensions and things like that. So yeah, great feedback. And you'll notice one of the things as well towards the top of the page, and it's a little more visible. Let me just pause this on here, is these tabs for running your queries. So one of the common feedback points we got as well was, you know, once I navigate away from the query I was doing in Playground, I've lost it completely, can't get back to it. So these tabs will help you kind of run multiple queries at a time, but also save those in memory so that, you know, when you navigate away to some other screen or tab, you can come back and see that same query again, the results there. In providing us more feedback specifically on Playground, please ping me or Ray, and we'll get you a link to our survey. We're open to more feedback as well as we continue to iterate on the design of this. But thanks to everyone who participated in the survey so far.
Cool. Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, and thanks everybody for sticking on with even with the Zoom challenges and went a little bit over. It's just amazed to see that nobody dropped off, and for some reason the live stream just keeps going. So I don't know how that works, but thanks for sticking around. And yeah, I'll probably write a sum up, create a sum up, like a thread on Discourse, because I usually add a link to the recordings there, but we'll probably add some notes from the pre-aggregation discussion, and people want to chime in there and add more thoughts. That would be great. So, all right. Well, thanks everybody. We'll do this again in about 4 weeks. Have a good day.
Thank you.
All right.